My name is Sarma Pervez, and I am presenting the time period between 1900 to 1949. In 1900, the Galveston hurricane left an estimated 6,000 to 8,000 people dead. This was in Galveston, Texas, as many know, and according to the census, the nation's population at that time was nearly 76 million. Okay? In 1901, President McKinley's second inauguration took place. He was also assassinated at this year, and when he died, he was succeeded by his Vice President Theodore Roosevelt. In 1903, the United States acquired the Panama Canal. The treaty was signed on November 17th. Also, the Wright brothers made the first controlled sustained flight in heavier-than-air aircraft at Kitty Hawk. In 1905, Theodore Roosevelt's second inauguration took place. In 1906, San Francisco earthquake left 500 dead or missing, this is an estimate, and it destroyed about 4 square miles of the city. In 1908, the Bureau of Investigation was established, or the Bureau. This is not yet the FBI, we will get to that later. 1909, William Howard Taft is inaugurated as the 27th president. A fun fact is that his wife has 80 Japanese cherry trees planted along the banks of the Potomac River. In 1913, President Woodrow Wilson is inaugurated as the 28th president. Also, the 17th Amendment to the Constitution is ratified, providing for the direct election of United States senators by popular vote rather than by the state legislators. I did 1914 to 1918 together because this was World War I for the United States. So the United States entered World War I and declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. 3 years after the conflict, there was a treaty signed, and that was called the Armistice Treaty. This was on November 11th, 1918. Also, in 1914, traffic is open at the Panama Canal. 1915, the first long-distance telephone service between New York and San Francisco is demonstrated. In 1916, the United States agrees to purchase Danish West Indies, or the Virgin Islands, for $25 million. The treaty is signed on August 14th. Also, Jeannette Rankin of Montana is the first woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In 1917, Wilson's second inauguration took place, and the first regular airmail service begins. These are some vintage stamps right here. In 1918, the worldwide influenza epidemic strikes. By 1920, nearly 20 million people are dead. In the United States alone, 500,000 people have died. In 1919, the League of Nations meets for the first time. The United States is not represented, though. Also, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution is ratified, prohibiting the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol. It is later repealed by the 21st Amendment, but we will get to that later. Also, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution is ratified, granting women the right to vote. Also, the Treaty of Versailles, outlining terms for peace after World War I, is rejected by the Senate. In 1921, Warren G. Harding is inaugurated as the 29th president. He signs a resolution declaring peace with Austria and Germany. In 1923, President Harding dies suddenly. He is succeeded by his vice president, Calvin Coolidge. But during the Harding administration, something called the Teapot Dome scandal broke out. It was Senate basically launching an investigation into improper leasing of naval oil reserves. 1925. Coolidge's second inauguration took place. Also, Tennessee passes a law against the teaching of evolution in public schools. This was a very big thing because evolution was basically made illegal in this state, and basically it was not letting kids learn this type of education. And one teacher wanted to teach his kids, and it set the stage for the Scopes monkey trial. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh takes and makes the first solo nonstop transatlantic flight in his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. In 1929, Herbert Hoover is inaugurated as the 31st president. Also, the stock market crashes and starts the Great Depression. In 1931, the Star Spangled Banner is adopted as the national anthem. In 1932, Haiti Wyatt Caraway of Arkansas is the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate to fill a vacancy caused by the death of her husband. She is re-elected in 1932 and 1938. Also, Amelia Earhart completes the first solo nonstop transatlantic flight by a woman. In 1933, the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, sometimes called the Lame Duck Amendment, is ratified, moving the president's inauguration date from March 4th to January 20th. Also, Franklin Roosevelt is inaugurated as the 32nd president. He starts something called the New Deal, and it's basically recovery measures that are enacted by Congress to jumpstart the economy to help it get back to where it used to be. Also, the 21st Amendment is ratified, repealing prohibition, or basically the ban on alcohol. In 1935, the Works Progress Administration is established. Also, the Social Security Act is passed. Also, the Bureau of Investigation, or called the FBI, is established under J. Edgar Hoover. In 1937, Roosevelt's second inauguration takes place. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act is passed. This gives people or United States workers a fair minimum wage for that time. I did 1939 to 1945 together because as World War II. Also, in my opinion, I believe that World War II is one of the main things in this time period. And at first, the United States was pretty neutral in the European conflict. But as time progressed, it inserted itself into the war. So, President Roosevelt's third inauguration also took place. But basically, Japan, this is how the U.S. got into the war. Japan attacked Hawaii, Guam, and the Philippines. The U.S. declared war on Japan. So, because they did that, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. The United States also declared war on Germany and Italy. And as time progressed, the Soviets, Great Britain, and the United States were called the Allies. And they were against the Axis powers, which were basically Germany, Japan, and Italy, three big ones. And they would work together and they would invade different places that were occupied by the Axis powers. And one of the big ones was when the Allies invaded France, and this day was called D-Day. Also, President Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin meet at the Yalta Conference, which is in the USSR, to discuss post-war occupation of Germany since it did surrender. The U.S. is still at war with Japan, but they soon surrender after the United States drops 2 devastating atomic bombs. In 1945, the United Nations is established. In 1946, the Philippines, which had been ceded to the United States by Spain at the end of the Spanish-American War, becomes an independent republic. This is really interesting because many Americans also went to the Philippines. That's why I include this picture, and I believe the time is also very accurate too. All right. 1947. The Presidential Succession Act is signed into law by President Truman. Also, the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, is established. In 1948, Congress passes Foreign Aid Bill. This includes the Marshall Plan. Basically, the Marshall Plan helps provide Europe, or the parts of Europe that were destroyed in the war, some recovery leeway. This was on April 2nd. And during this time, which was the Cold War now, the Soviets begun to have a blockade of Berlin. Many refer to it as the Berlin Wall. And it was one of the first major crisis in the not in the United States, but in the Cold War as a whole. In response to this, the US and Great Britain began an airlift for food and fuel and other resources to the people who were being oppressed in West Berlin. In 1949, and this is also the conclusion of this time period for my PowerPoint, President Truman's second inauguration took place. Also, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, is established. Also, the Soviets end blockade of Berlin, but airlift still continues for a little while longer. These are the sources I used, and thank you for watching. Hope you liked it.